My sister, Emma, has always been the golden child. Our parents doted on her, spoiled her with gifts, and let her get away with almost anything. If she threw a tantrum as a kid, she got what she wanted. If she got bad grades, my parents would talk to the teachers and make excuses for her. Meanwhile, I had to work for everything. If I wanted something, I had to earn it. If I messed up, I faced consequences. It was frustrating, but after years of seeing how she was treated differently, I just accepted it. Growing up, Emma had a habit of doing whatever she pleased. She had relationships but never seemed to take them seriously. She cheated on almost every boyfriend she had, but somehow they always forgave her. She had a way of twisting situations to make herself the victim, and she was good at it. My parents never held her accountable, and I guess that made her believe she could do anything without consequences. When she met Mike, I was surprised. He was nothing like the guys she usually dated. He was hardworking, responsible, and one of the nicest people I had ever met. He came from a humble background, worked his way through college, and had a good job. He treated Emma like a queen, always going out of his way to make her happy. From the outside, they seemed like the perfect couple. But I knew Emma too well. I had my doubts, but I kept them to myself. As the wedding day approached, things seemed to be going smoothly. My parents were overjoyed, constantly talking about how Emma was finally settling down with the perfect man. They spent a fortune on the wedding, making sure everything was grand and luxurious. Emma soaked up all the attention, acting like a princess. Then, a week before the wedding, everything changed. I was out with some friends when I saw her. She was supposed to be at home finalizing wedding details, but there she was, at a hotel bar, laughing and flirting with a man who was definitely not Mike. At first, I thought maybe he was a friend or a coworker, but then I saw her kiss him. Not just a peck on the cheek, but a full-on kiss. I froze. I wanted to believe I was mistaken, but I knew I wasn't. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures. I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew I had to do something. This wasn't just a random boyfriend she was cheating on. This was her fiancé, a man who was about to commit his life to her. I debated whether to confront her right there, but I decided to wait. Maybe she would realize her mistake and come clean on her own. Maybe there was some explanation. But deep down, I knew Emma. She was never the type to admit she was wrong. Later that night, I sent her a message. I didn't accuse her outright. I just said, "I saw you tonight." Her reply came almost instantly. So, that one word told me everything. She didn't care. I asked her what she was thinking, and she just laughed it off, saying it was one last fling before the wedding, like it was some harmless joke. When I told her she needed to tell Mike, she got angry. She told me to stay out of it, that it wasn't my business, and that if I told him, I would be ruining her life. I didn't respond after that. I needed to think. Mike was a good guy and he didn't deserve this. But I also knew how manipulative Emma could be. If I told him, there was a chance he wouldn't believe me. She would twist the story, make herself the victim, and turn my parents against me. I wasn't sure what to do, but deep down, I knew I couldn't let this go. I barely slept that night. My mind kept racing, running through every possible outcome. If I told Mike, would he believe me? If he did, would he actually leave her? Or would he somehow forgive her like all the other guys before him? And what about my parents? They had spent months planning this wedding, throwing their money into the most extravagant venue, the best caterers, the most expensive dress. They would never accept anything that ruined the perfect wedding. But none of that mattered compared to the truth. Mike was about to marry a cheater. The next morning, I made my decision. I sent Mike a message. I didn't say much, just asked if we could meet up. He responded quickly, agreeing to grab coffee that afternoon. I knew I couldn't just text him what I saw. This had to be in person. When I arrived at the cafe, Mike was already there, sipping his coffee like it was just a normal day. He smiled when he saw me, completely unaware of what was coming. I sat down, took a deep breath, and told him everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him where I saw her, who she was with, and what she did. Then, I pulled out my phone and showed him the pictures. I expected some kind of reaction, anger, disbelief, sadness. But Mike just stared at the screen, his face unreadable. After a long silence, he finally looked up. "Thanks for telling me," he said. Then he got up, threw his coffee cup in the trash, and walked out. I sat there, stunned. That was it? No questions, no demands for more proof, no visible anger? I didn't know if he was in shock or if he just didn't care. For the next few days, nothing seemed to change. The wedding preparations continued as planned. Emma acted completely normal, still basking in the attention of being the bride-to-be. If Mike had confronted her, I saw no sign of it. I even started doubting myself, wondering if maybe he had just decided to let it go. Then, 2 days before the wedding, something strange happened. Emma called me, which was already unusual. We weren't the type of siblings who had long, heartfelt conversations. When I answered, her voice was lower than usual. "Mike's acting weird," she said. I asked her what she meant. "He's just different. He's not as affectionate. He doesn't seem excited about the wedding. I don't know. It's like he's waiting for something." I wanted to ask if she had told him the truth, but I knew she hadn't. If she had, she would have been panicking, trying to do damage control. Instead, she just sounded confused. I played dumb. "Maybe he's just nervous about the wedding." She sighed. "Yeah, maybe." I didn't say anything else, but after we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Mike knew. That much was clear. But he wasn't leaving, and he wasn't confronting her. So what was he waiting for? The next 2 days were strangely normal, too normal. The wedding plans went on without a hitch, and Mike played his part perfectly. If he was upset, he didn't show it. He attended the final wedding rehearsal, smiled for pictures, and responded enthusiastically when people talked about their future together. If I hadn't told him the truth, I would have thought he was just another happy groom counting down the hours until he married the love of his life. But I knew better. Something was off. It wasn't just what Emma had told me on the phone. It was the way Mike carried himself now. Before, he had been a little awkward but deeply in love, always doting on her, always making an effort to be the perfect fiancé. Now there was a quiet confidence to him, a strange sense of patience, like a man playing a long game. Emma didn't seem to notice. She was too caught up in the attention, too focused on herself. My parents were no different. They had spent the past week making sure everything was flawless, and as far as they were concerned, the wedding was happening no matter what. The night before the wedding, there was a big family dinner. Everyone was there, relatives from out of town, family friends, even some of Mike's coworkers. It was supposed to be a celebration, the last big event before the big day. Mike was charming as ever. He laughed at my dad's bad jokes, toasted to a lifetime of happiness with Emma, and acted exactly like a man ready to get married. Emma, meanwhile, was in full princess mode, soaking up all the attention. She talked about how amazing the honeymoon was going to be, how expensive her dress was, how lucky she was to find someone like Mike. It was almost painful to watch. At one point, Mike caught my eye from across the room. For just a second, his expression shifted. Just a flicker of something cold and calculating before the smile returned. That was when I knew. Mike wasn't ignoring what I had told him. He wasn't going to call off the wedding. He had a plan. And whatever it was going to happen at the wedding. The realization made me uneasy. I wasn't sure what he was planning, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good for Emma. Part of me felt like she deserved it. She had cheated, and she had no remorse. But another part of me, maybe the part that had spent years watching our parents protect her from consequences, felt nervous. Mike wasn't just going to walk away. He was waiting, and tomorrow at the wedding, everyone would find out why. The morning of the wedding was chaotic, but in a way that felt completely normal. Bridesmaids rushing around, hairstylists and makeup artists setting up, my parents stressing over last-minute details. Everything was moving forward like any other wedding day, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Emma was in her element, surrounded by people complimenting her, fussing over her dress, and making sure she had everything she needed. She was glowing, not because she was marrying the love of her life, but because she was the center of attention. Meanwhile, Mike was calm, too calm. While Emma soaked in the spotlight, he stayed in the background, smiling, nodding, playing his role. But I noticed small things. How he barely touched Emma when they took pre-wedding photos. How his smiles never quite reached his eyes. How he glanced at his watch more than once, like he was counting down. Something was coming. The ceremony was set to take place in a massive, beautifully decorated venue. Hundreds of guests filled the seats, waiting for the moment Emma would walk down the aisle. My parents were beaming, completely oblivious. They had no idea that their perfect daughter's wedding wasn't going to end the way they imagined. Then the music started. Everyone stood. Emma entered, glowing with excitement, her perfect white dress flowing behind her. She walked down the aisle like she was floating, her eyes locked onto Mike's. To anyone else, this was a picture-perfect moment. But I could see it, Mike's expression. He wasn't looking at her with love. He was looking at her like a man with a secret. The officiant started the ceremony, going through the usual introductions. Everything seemed normal, but my chest felt tight. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when. Then, right before the vows, Mike took a deep breath, turned to the crowd and said, "Before we continue, I have something to say." The room went silent. Emma's smile faltered for the first time that day. "Mike?" she whispered, but he ignored her. He reached into his suit pocket, pulled out his phone, and started tapping the screen. Then he turned it around and held it up for everyone to see. A massive projector screen behind him lit up, and there it was. Photo after photo of Emma, at the hotel kissing another man, meeting up in different locations, text messages she thought had been deleted. Gasps echoed through the crowd. My parents looked frozen. Emma went pale. Mike turned back to her, his voice eerily calm. "I know what you did." Emma's eyes darted around, looking for an escape, looking for a way out. But there was none. The wedding was over, and Mike had just made sure everyone knew why. For a moment, the entire venue was dead silent. No one moved, no one spoke. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector, still cycling through pictures of Emma with another man. Then, all at once, chaos erupted. Guests gasped, whispering to each other, heads turning toward my parents, toward Emma, toward Mike. My mom looked like she was about to faint. My dad was frozen in place, mouth slightly open, as if his brain had short-circuited. Emma, however, reacted exactly how I expected. She tried to play the victim. "Mike, this isn't what it looks like," she stammered, reaching for his hand. But Mike took a step back, his face unreadable. "Isn't it?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Emma's breathing grew shallow, and I could see her mind racing, trying to find a way out of this. She turned toward my parents. "Mom, Dad, you know I would never." But my dad didn't look at her. He was staring at the screen, his hands clenched into fists. My mom was shaking her head, her lips pressed tightly together, as if denying what was in front of her would somehow make it go away. The officiant awkwardly cleared his throat, clearly realizing he had no idea how to handle whatever was happening. Should we take a moment?" he asked hesitantly. Mike ignored him and looked back at the crowd. "I didn't want to do this in private," he said, "because Emma never does anything in private. She lies in private. She cheats in private. But today, everyone gets to see who she really is." A murmur swept through the room. Some guests awkwardly shifted in their seats. Others looked outright fascinated, like they were witnessing the greatest drama of their lives. Emma, however, had enough. "You're humiliating me," she screeched. her voice rising in pitch. Mike let out a cold laugh. "You humiliated yourself," he shot back. "I was just stupid enough to believe you wouldn't." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, and for a second, I thought she might actually break down. But then her expression changed, anger replacing desperation. "You planned this," she accused. "You set me up." Mike's face darkened. "You think I wanted this? I wanted to marry the woman I thought you were. But that woman doesn't exist." Emma's face twisted in frustration, her breathing heavy. She glanced at the exit, as if debating whether to make a run for it. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, my mom finally snapped. "This wedding is still happening," she shouted. Silence. Everyone turned to look at her, shocked. My dad's head whipped toward her. "What?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We spent too much money on this." My mom insisted, her voice shaking. "The guests are here. The food is paid for. We can fix this." My jaw dropped. I wasn't even surprised, but hearing her actually say it out loud was something else. Mike, however, looked completely done. He let out a slow breath, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then, without another word, he pulled the ring off his finger and tossed it onto the floor. "Fix it with someone else," he said. Then he turned and walked out. The room stayed silent for a beat. Then, like a switch had been flipped, everyone started talking at once. Emma stood there, humiliated, stunned, abandoned. And for the first time in her life, there was no way out. The second Mike walked out, the entire wedding fell apart. People were whispering, murmuring to each other, and some guests were already making their way toward the exits. Others, probably family members or drama-loving friends, stayed seated, eyes glued to Emma like she was about to put on an encore performance. Emma, on the other hand, looked like a cornered animal. Her hands were shaking, her perfect bridal makeup was smudged from frustrated tears, and she kept looking around like she was trying to find someone, anyone, who would rescue her from this. But no one did. My dad was still sitting stiffly in his chair, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. My mom, however, was still in full delusion mode. "We can fix this," she kept saying under her breath, gripping Emma's arm. "We can fix this." Emma finally snapped out of her shock and turned to my mom. "How?" "He just walked out. He humiliated me in front of everyone." Mom shook her head as if refusing to believe what was happening. "We'll talk to him. He loves you." I let out a quiet laugh, unable to stop myself. Emma and my mom both turned to glare at me. "Oh yeah," I said, crossing my arms. "I'm sure he'll come running back after you call him a liar in front of hundreds of people." "Stay out of this," Emma snapped, her voice still shaky. I raised an eyebrow. "You don't get to say that to me. You lost that right the second you told me to mind my own business when I caught you cheating." Her face twisted in fury. "You should have stayed out of it. If you hadn't told him, none of this would be happening." I laughed again, louder this time. "So it's my fault? Not the fact that you were sleeping around? Wow, Emma, you really never change." At this point, my dad stood up and exhaled sharply. "Enough," he muttered. Then he turned to my mom. "We're leaving." My mom's head snapped toward him. "We can't just." "This is done," he said, his voice firm. "Mike's gone. There's no wedding." For a second, it looked like my mom wanted to argue, but then she glanced around the room, noticing how people were staring, whispering, judging. She knew she had already lost. She grabbed Emma's arm. "Let's go." Emma resisted at first, but when she looked around and saw how people were still watching, still waiting to see what she'd do next, she let out a frustrated growl and yanked off her veil. "I hate all of you," she hissed under her breath before storming off. The second she was gone, the tension in the room shifted. Some guests awkwardly got up and started leaving. A few of Mike's friends were still sitting in their seats, stunned. The officiant, poor guy, just slowly closed his book and backed away like he wanted to pretend he was never there. I sighed, shaking my head. The wedding was officially over. But something told me this was just the beginning of Emma's downfall. By the time we got back home, the house felt suffocating. My parents were in the kitchen, whispering furiously, while Emma locked herself in her room. The wedding disaster had already started spreading through social media. Guests had posted vague updates, some even sharing clips of Mike's big reveal. Emma's perfect day had turned into a public humiliation, and she had no one to blame but herself. That night, my mom tried calling Mike's family. She left voicemail after voicemail, begging them to talk some sense into him, and telling them that Emma just made a mistake. It was pathetic to watch. Meanwhile, Emma was in full meltdown mode. She finally stormed downstairs around midnight, eyes red from crying, phone clutched in her hand. "Mike blocked me," she shouted. "He blocked me on everything." I bit back a smirk. "Shocking." Emma whirled on me. "You think this is funny?" she hissed. I shrugged. "A little, yeah." My dad rubbed his temples like he was developing the worst headache of his life. "Emma, it's over. You need to move on." She looked at him like he had just slapped her. "Move on? From my fiancé? From my wedding?" Dad sighed. "Mike made his choice. He's not coming back." Emma's hands shook. "But he's supposed to. He loves me. He's supposed to forgive me." I let out a sharp laugh. "Like all the other guys you cheated on?" "Yeah, well, Mike's not them." Emma looked like she was about to scream, but then her phone dinged. Her face lit up for a second before her expression darkened. She tapped the screen furiously, reading something. "What is it?" my mom asked nervously. Emma's voice wavered as she read aloud. "Hope you and the guy from the hotel are happy together. Since you clearly didn't want a husband, at least you have a backup." Mike had sent it. A final, parting shot before cutting her off completely. Emma let out a strangled sound, then threw her phone across the room. It smacked against the wall and clattered to the floor. My mom gasped. My dad just shook his head. "This isn't happening," Emma whispered, sinking onto the couch. "This isn't happening." But it was. Mike had exposed her, humiliated her, and left her. And now, she had to face the one thing she had never faced before. Consequences. The days that followed were a slow-motion car crash for Emma. She refused to leave the house, refused to eat, refused to acknowledge reality. But reality wasn't waiting for her to catch up. The wedding disaster had gone viral. Some guests had filmed parts of Mike's speech, and within 24 hours, the videos were everywhere. Strangers on the internet were tearing Emma apart, dissecting every piece of the story. People were calling her the runaway cheater, the hotel bride, and a dozen other names she definitely didn't appreciate. She tried to report the videos, but it was too late. The damage was done. Mike, on the other hand, had completely disappeared. He took a leave of absence from work, wiped his social media clean, and, as far as anyone could tell, had gone off the grid. If Emma was hoping for some kind of redemption arc, she wasn't getting it. Meanwhile, my parents were desperately trying to do damage control. My mom called relatives, trying to explain it away as a misunderstanding. My dad, on the other hand, barely spoke to Emma at all. He wasn't the type to yell or scream, but his disappointment was deafening. Then, a week after the wedding, the final nail in the coffin arrived. A thick envelope addressed to Emma. She opened it at the kitchen table, eyes scanning the document inside. As soon as she reached the last page, she let out a strangled sound and dropped it. I picked it up before she could stop me. An invoice. From Mike. For every single wedding expense he had paid for. Tens of thousands of dollars. I whistled. Oof. He's really making you pay for it. Emma's face was pale. He can't do this. My dad took the paper from me, reading it over. He let out a tired sigh. Actually, he can. Everything's in his name. And he has receipts. Emma shook her head violently. No, he wouldn't do this. He loves me. I stared at her. He loved you. Past tense. Then you cheated on him. My mom, still stuck in her delusions, tried to smooth it over. We can talk to him. We can work something out. But my dad wasn't having it. He tossed the invoice back on the table and looked Emma dead in the eye. No, she can work it out. This is her mess. Emma's lip trembled. Dad. No, he said firmly. You lied. You cheated. You embarrassed yourself in front of everyone. And now you're going to take responsibility for it. It was the first time in her life she had ever been held accountable. And judging by the way her face crumpled, she had no idea how to handle it. For once, no one was rushing to save her. Mike was gone. Her reputation was in ruins. And now she was stuck paying the price, literally. As I watched her sink into silence, reality finally hitting her, I couldn't help but think, for the first time in her life, she got exactly what she deserved.